see it, it's www.wired.com.
Okay.
And then it goes /news/space/0, 2697, 69071, 00 HTML. To me, that means nothing.
Yeah, no, I understand. But basically what I'm finding curious is that certain things are popping up in our entities, such as the issue with NASA and this secrets revealed business. And we've discovered recently, too, something that was not initially apparent in the first years of our work, and that is that there appear to be like metadata layers is what we call them. But it appears that there's, if you will, themes that are operating at any given time, as though we're all watching a particular play with a very complex plot, but at any given period of time of maybe months to years, you might actually find that there's an overall theme that seems to be repeating in all these just different pattern layers.
Really?
Does that sort of make sense?
Yeah, can you give us some examples?
Well, give me an example in the sense that when we first became aware of it, we were in it, what we found out was the tail end of a metadata level that we called cohesion. All the words had a tendency to come in conjunction with or juxtaposed against the idea at an emotional level of cohesion, union, all of us together, all of this kind of thing. And obviously in the period of 9/11, there was that immediate follow-up of all the cohesion layers, and everybody's, united we stand, and the union, and all of this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And it was very much a situation of all of the issues of the time, globally it turned out, when we really looked at it in a particular light, were around this basic metadata theme of cohesion, which shifted. And that's really the only reason we caught it, was because we actually caught the shift. It's kind of like being inside the forest as a squirrel hanging onto a tree, and the whole forest getting an earthquake. And unless you happen to be, as a squirrel, looking at the other trees and seeing them all shake the same way, you're not really aware it's not just the wind. So we just coincidentally just happened to be looking at this particular thing and caught this transition from cohesion into militancy. Now, another example was all of the debate, referendum recently in the past couple of years in the European Union about their constitution and about the whole concept of their union, their cohesion. And yet, at the same time, I've had people come back and say, but for instance, Bush began his war of aggression against Iraq during this period of time. And that is true, but he did it within the broader context of the cohesion of it all. And it was actually melded into that cohesion, and it harmonized briefly and was able to take place. Now what we're seeing is that we've transited into this period of time that we're calling aggression or militancy, and that vast numbers of issues seem to be working out in both personal and private level, all the way up to global issues relating to militancy.
Does that mean even outside of the U.S.'s militancy? Or?
Correct.
Really?
If, for instance, think of the number of articles you personally have seen in the last 18 months that go directly to the idea of the Chinese and military.
Oh, my gosh. Oh, hundreds.
Exactly.
Sure.
Okay, and actually if you were to go back and look for that same theme and subject for the previous 18 months, you're going to find just a fraction. Okay,
now, let's take that for a minute then, Cliff. What does that mean to you, that literally Red China is becoming more militant, and the world better watch out because they're going to start...
No, let's take it back up. Let's not take them in isolation. I'm saying that the theme of militancy is playing out over all peoples on the planet. As though someone in space had been shining a militancy beam on us, and we're all rotating into it the same way we do into sunlight, and we all play out our little actions. Only if given the opportunity to be expressed in a militant fashion, it will be done so, as opposed to a peaceful fashion. And the thoughts, I think, are tending to go towards aggressive and militant thoughts given an equal weighted opportunity.
But wouldn't that mean if, even from a subconscious level, if the different countries are beginning to express these ideas through the runs, that means that we literally are becoming closer and closer to more militant action between the different players?
I think that's a very logical conclusion, and one which we could say historically existed if one were to go back and spend an extensive time reading both American English and European newspapers of the 20s and 30s. I think you would also get that same feeling. That at some point something occurred, and everybody started getting very bellicose. And, all of us were very raspy. Now, let me say that it's kind of an amazing thought, but imagine the idea that there is a giant militancy ray gun up there held by a giant space goat, and this space goat doesn't like us, and it's beaming down this militancy ray.
Yeah.
Well, once you become aware of the militancy ray, then you could say to yourself, okay, I have a tendency during this period to express things in a militant fashion, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I need to fall prey to it. So, for instance, I may decide that I'm going to personally express my militancy by refining my martial arts technique and taking it up to a higher internal level, rather than going on out and trying to beat up my neighbor.
Taking it up to a higher interior or internal level.
Correct.
What does that mean?
Because I know that the general theme is there, I can still harmonize with it and not run a risk of, if you will, having my vibrations rupture against this global theme that seems to be prevalent. And if you read literature from the time of World War II, you find that there were many people that knew in the early 30s that war was coming in, it was going to be horrific.
Wow.
And they got out.
Got out of, like, Germany, you mean?
Oh, all over the place. I mean, at that point it was just, I know of people that left England because they knew it was too vulnerable.
Wow.
Now, if we know that that's a theme that's playing out, we've also found that there's other metadata layers that we're operating in currently, one right now that's very strong apparently, and that's we're calling secrets revealed. And we've got all kinds of secrets pouring out of everybody. And on a global level, and if you read foreign press, it's just as bad for them as it is for the United States, although a lot of it does focus on us because we're the raspy 800-pound gorilla in the living room. And so we find that, for instance, we're looking at secrets revealed, but that's expressed within the overall larger metadata level of the militancy. So we can expect all kinds of secrets to come out about war, about our relationship with it, and so on. And if one were to think about it in a karmic sense, it's kind of like we're being given a karmic opportunity to work out our issues.
Now, that's an interesting approach.
That's how I'm personally taking it, because I don't want to run into one of those periods in life where everything you do is wrong, and it turns out to be that way because you're running counter to larger trends. I first started getting hints about this, having done complex system work for people in the late 80s and seeing it in computers. I started applying it to the world around me and noticed that we were heading into the employment and computer boom in the 90s and got on the bandwagon in 92. Started working for people like Microsoft and so on. Developed a set of skills that I knew would be marketable. Since then, I've come to a larger understanding of how these complex patterns work and see them applying in larger context. I also know that on a personal level, they actually do affect me. So I happen to have a particular relationship with the military and aggression, and I'm a raspy fellow and have a bit of a temper. And so I've decided what I'll do is, I will refine my martial arts technique and take out my militancy issues that way, such that they will not tend to express themselves unchecked.
Unchecked. But it doesn't mean that you are totally subjugating your, let's say, abilities to respond to a certain stimulus where you would apply your knowledge of martial arts.
Correct.
Okay.
Correct.
All right. Okay.
But this must be done on a conscious level. If I don't want to be controlled by that big giant space goat.
Yeah. Okay. In all of the runs that have been happening, and let's say in the past year or so, Clif, where do you see, because we got off on a fantastic role last time. Where do you see your knowledge and expertise in spiritual matters coming into all of the information that the runs are coming up with now?
Well, that goes to a difficult area. I'm somewhat schooled, or educated. I shouldn't use the word schooling. I'm self-educated in some areas of what would have to go towards metaphysics, whether it's religious, spiritual, or however you want to frame it. But coming from a scientific background, there's no reason that the two need be separate. And then you discover from a linguistic background that basically that there's all kinds of strange little links out there that are extremely curious. So, for instance, why should the Basque language have an exact sentence phonetically that means exactly the same thing and has exactly the same emotional tone as the same four-word sentence in Japanese? You know, it's like, that's rather odd. Should not occur statistically.
Exactly
the two
the
are separate
same.
and so on.
Exactly
we find
the same
all of these
sounds?
strange little links, and then you start digging around and like, oh, geez, somebody out there is hiding vast quantities of knowledge from the ordinary person unless they go and root it around. Mm-hmm. And then somebody is not only hiding that knowledge, they are actively coding that knowledge with an emotional flavor or tone to discourage people from rooting around in it.
That's pretty far out.
It is, but you talk to anybody that's into the forbidden archaeology field.
Right.
They're feeling that. They're living that. Every time they poke their nose into something like, giant pyramidical structures off the coast of Japan indicating a highly advanced civilization, or huge megaliths in Turkey in rock sizes that are obviously moved and placed certain ways, that we could not build cranes large enough to lift them today if we put the combined resources of the world to work.
Right, yeah.
And this exists, and yet sure don't see it in your education system.
That is for darn sure.
And you sure don't see the discussions of the other intelligent quasi-hominid species that cohabited the planet with man. The 20,000 elongated skulls that are not the work of elongating skulls via taping the kids to boards, as they would have you believe.
Where did they find those? Was that India?
Oh, it's all over the planet. There were a bunch that were recently discovered down in your neck of the woods.
Oh, I thought they were just people that came across the border.
No, what we were looking at,
That's a joke, Clif.
Yes, I know. Yeah. But the subject for your area was actually the reports from that New Zealand team that got all caught up in the Americans basically putting the kibosh on them saying anything about it.
Wow.
And then, you start seeing the same kind of things where we have particular kinds of head shapes shown in hieroglyphs and attributing certain powers to certain head shapes, having helmets that could supposedly impart knowledge without having to think about it.
Right. Which is where our concept of the dunce cap came from.
Correct.
Yeah.
And so you start seeing all these little different threads, and you think, okay, well, things are not as we've been told. Now it's time to get serious about it. And if you really, really got serious about it from a linguistic point of view, which is where I was at the time, then ultimately you may find yourself reading some stuff in Sanskrit and being directed towards, or Chinese, and being directed towards one of two particular kinds of books, which predate the subsequent civilization from the last flood episode. Okay. Tell me more. Well, one of the books is The Science of Yoga. It's got a number of modern authors. It doesn't matter who wrote it. All they're doing is taking the same sutras and the same Patanjali stuff and redoing it. And the other is the Chinese Book of Life. And they're both sometimes called The Secret of the Golden Flower. A really good translation is Richard Wilhelm. That one shouldn't be messed with unless you've done some serious meditation, because you can cause yourself some harm, although they do have a section in there saying if any of this stuff happens to you, don't do it anymore.